Hello, everybody! It is Fight Club Hubs, and with me, as always, is Jan and Mr. Mark. And welcome to the season finale of GVN Live Season 3. And what a treat you're in for today, because we are going to be doing a retrospective of the Doom franchise, more importantly, the first Doom game. So, before we begin, let's, what the hell? Jan disappeared on my screen. There she is.
Apparently,
there she is. Okay, and speaking of which, there's Jan. Hi, Jan. How are you?
Hello. I am doing all right. It has been a very interesting start of my week, but that is beside the point. VGA's and Monster Hunter World excitement notwithstanding.
Yeah, we had a lot of big news. I'm excited because, new Monster Hunter content coming out next year. The new Godzilla trailer came out, and I had an orgasm. And I actually wasn't disappointed by the VGA awards. So, yeah, that's my last week. But let's go over it and ask Mr. Mark how your week is.
I mean, it's fine. I've been playing Fallout 76.
I'm sorry.
It's not like good, but it could definitely be worse.
I guess that's all right, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine.
It's fine.
They've patched it several times since the initial launch, so and I didn't pre-order the collector's edition, so I don't care about like the I mean, I care about it. It sucks that it happened, but you know what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't.
You weren't due a canvas bag because you didn't get a nylon bag. That makes sense.
Correct. Exactly. That's where my thing is with it.
Okay. Well, so 25 years of hell have passed pretty quickly, if you ask me. 1993, December 10th. Doom came into the world, and there was peace on Earth. Not really.
All that now.
Okay, I have said this numerous times, though, just to start off. Doom is my favorite franchise. Out of every game I have played in the past 35 years that I can recall, no franchise has had me coming back to playing the games more often than Doom. I love my Tomb Raiders, I love my Marios, I love my Final Fantasies, and just about any other game in between, but Doom is the franchise I keep coming back to. And with the Doom Eternal coming out possibly sometime in the middle of next year, I am very excited. But we're not talking about Doom Eternal, we are talking about Doom, and we're going to go back to the beginning. We're going to do a little retrospective, talk about its impact on the gaming industry, talk about its influence, and how it's managed to stay alive for so many years with a strong community and some amazing mods. To start off with, let's look at the history of the game. Back in the late 80s, there was a company, you might have heard of them, id Software. They made some interesting games. They made their first pseudo 3D game called Wolfenstein 3D, which is a remake of another Wolfenstein game that came out in the mid-80s. This game was not really true 3D, as it actually had sprite scaling, which was used as a technique to make the illusion of 3D movement in a 2D space. It was not the first-person shooter, however, that honor goes to the game that came out a year before, to Catacombs. So, of course, after that, which was like 1991, a few years go by and they released a few more games in their 2D side-scrolling series, Commander Keen. And at about this time, Carmack and Adrian Carmack and, that's right. Most people seem to forget that John Carmack's brother, Adrian, is involved with id Software. Him and Romero decided that they wanted to go forward with a project of a game that was a little bit more darker in tone, something more action-based, and that project eventually became Doom. Doom, by the way, in case you were curious, there is a lot of really amazing info in this little book that came out in the mid-90s called the Doom Bible. In there, they talked about a lot of the secrets that went on behind the scenes in regards to the programming of the game, a lot of the ideas they had. In fact, even many of the ideas you saw in the Doom Bible eventually came to fruition in, John Romero's opus, which was Daikatana.
Ugh.
I wouldn't call that an opus.
Hey, it was
Unless
the game.
You're talking unless you're talking opus from Bloom County.
Yikes.
Ouch. Okay. Some of the things.
I too wish for wings that worked.
Some of the ambitious things they wanted to do for the original game of Doom involved making it even more violent than it originally was. Sure, you saw a lot of blood and dismemberment of monsters, but they wanted to see body parts fly off. They wanted to see bullet hole decals in the walls that would stay there permanently. They wanted to have a more robust lighting system. Unfortunately, they had system limitations, which was in the form of a 386 or 486 processor that was, the most popular hardware at the time for IBM PCs before Windows came out. Well, Windows 95 anyway. And speaking of Windows 95, in a nice little Microsoft press conference, Doom was pretty much, used as the platform to push gaming on the Windows platform with a special edition that was released on a CD. Doom has pretty much significantly from that point on been ported everywhere. It is probably the second most ported game in history, not counting Tetris because that's literally multiple different variations of the game by multiple different companies, probably behind Street Fighter 2, which has numerous ports across every platform as well. If there's another game that has been ported more often, then I would like someone to point it out. But just as an idea to let you know what systems this has been ported to, bear with me. You have the original release for DOS, and then it came out for Windows 95. Then you have other operating systems like OS2, IRIX, Solaris, Mac OS, an unofficial port to Linux, Acorn, Next Step. Then you had the console ports and the handheld ports. You had the Atari Jaguar, you had the 3DO, the Super Nintendo, the 32X, the Saturn and PlayStation ports as well. On top of that, you had Years Go By, and they had handheld ports for the Tapwave Zodiac and the iPhone, the Game Boy Advance, and then for the modern systems, it came out on Xbox Live Arcade, and then the original Xbox as part of the Collector's Edition of Doom 3, and then part of the BFG edition for Doom 3 for the modern systems, and eventually being released on PS4 and Xbox One. So, I lost count. How many was that? Who knows?
I don't know, like 15.
Yeah, one of the most heavily ported games of all time, with maybe only minor variations, and some really interesting stuff done in regards to all the ports, like, textures and graphic modifiers in order for the game to run properly, especially the Super Nintendo version, which even though that game looked like shit, it was pretty amazing how they were able to get it to run with the help of the SFX chip. I would say upon release, Doom was super well received. They started it off by actually self-publishing it themselves. Their former publisher was Apogee Software, and they left them in order to pursue self-publishing, and they took a gamble by doing the route of shareware, by distributing a couple of floppies across the board, going to various video game stores and PC stores, and these shareware discs were to be given out for free, but that didn't stop some stores selling them for like $10. And upon getting these discs and completing the first portion of the game, it was set up into 3 chapters. You had 9 levels you can go through, and upon completing that first chapter, you were given a phone number for which you can call and get a mail order copy of the game. In fact, I'm an idiot. I should have actually grabbed that, and I would have shown you what the mail order copy looks like. You'll never be able to find that.
I want to say the Staples that I was because it was like the closest thing that I had to a game store when I was growing up until EB Games moved in. But the Staples near me was selling the copies of Doom that they had available that were just the shareware versions, which that was before the period where you could go onto websites and just download wherever you want. Like Steam didn't exist. There wasn't like a Doom website where you could go to download the thing. It was you had to go through bulletin board services, or you would have to go through some other type of client service. I want to say even at that point, like AOL was even in its infancy. So you really didn't have a lot of options for getting the game online. You had to have a physical copy of it if you wanted to play it in any capacity. So I didn't even have a PC at that point that could play Doom. So I wouldn't have been able to, even if I had wanted to. But yeah, like the shareware copies of the games that were supposed to be just distributed to people, they were like $10. Give us $10 for this. And then you would buy this shareware version of it that was just knee deep in the dead. And then it was like, oh yeah, you got to pay $50 for the rest of it. What? Fuck you, you know?
And that's why it was an extremely pirated game at that point as well. I mean, Leisure Suit Larry continues to be heralded as the most pirated game of all time, according to Mr. Al Lowe, but Doom was right up there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so, full version of Doom comes out in 1993. It is critically praised. People are loving it. And let's share our initial plays of it. Mark, please tell us your first time experience of when, where, and how.
My first time experience of Doom was the 32X version of it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I didn't have a computer that could handle Doom when I was a kid. I didn't get a computer that could have handled Doom until well after Doom 2 had come out. So for me, it was my mother got me the 32X. My mother got me the 32X version of Doom. And I mean, you know, if you've never played Doom before, it was fine. It's just that it didn't have some of the stuff that the original Doom had. I think there was like 18 stages to it, 19 stages, something like that.
It had about the same number of stages as the Super Nintendo version, which was about 18 stages with some cut content, but some pretty bad music. But go on.
The 32X version had, I felt, a decent soundtrack anyway. But yeah, like you didn't have the Cyber Demon, you didn't have the Spider Mastermind. The last stage was the one hidden stage that they had, where it was you loaded into the room full of Barons of Hell, and then you would run into the other room, and it was just full of cacodemons, and you would just hide in the corner and pray to God that they killed each other. That was the last stage of the 32X version.
Yep, I believe that is also the last stage of the Game Boy Advance port as well. I did beat that one, and I was very caught off guard because, you know, the Game Boy Advance was a more powerful system than the Super Nintendo and the 32X, and yet they couldn't incorporate more stuff into it.
I mean, it makes a certain amount of sense. You know, you've only got so much that you can reasonably do with the real estate that you're offered. So
yeah. All right, Jan, how about you? Your first time, when and where for Doom?
If I remember correctly, it was 1996, I want to say. 95, 96, in my friend's basement. That sounds overtly sexual, but it wasn't. A friend of mine had just gotten a copy off of it, off some random BBS that he had been on. He had already played it numerous times, but wanted to get me a copy, so he ended up getting a copy of it for me, so that I played it at his place a couple of times, then I took it home and played it on mine, you know, because at that time we were just passing around literally everything that we were playing on 1.44 floppies, so yeah, 3.5-inch floppy disks had everything we had on it, you know, including Windows, and it was ridiculous. I think at one point I had 3 full copies, like from disk 1 to disk 16 of Windows 3.11 at some point. I don't know.
I forget.
But it was around that time where he was kind of like, hey, look, this is a really cool thing. Like, we didn't call them first-person shooters back then. Like, back in the day, that we called them corridor shooters, because that was basically how that worked. Because it was basically just you running through corridors shooting at stuff. And, like, that was the only reason we called it that. And, like, we didn't realize that it was just going to end up being something that was just ridiculous until like around that time anyway. So 96 hits, and then, you know, we're all like, oh yeah, we're going to play this. And then I'm like, oh, that's great. And then Quake comes out because we're like, hey, check a thing. And we're like, oh, this is so much better. And a lot of it was also just because, you know, Trent Reznor was involved and Nine Inch Nails was kind of a thing back in high school. So what are you going to do? But yeah, like Doom for me, like I have to admit that like Quake was more of Quake and Unreal for me were more like my bread and butter when it came to FPS games. Like Doom for me, I played it like twice. The one that I played more was Doom 2, and the only reason I did that was because at that time, me and most of my friends all had dedicated lines for our modems, and so we all just dialed into each other's computers and played multiplayer with each other because, you know, that was a thing that we did back then. But aside from that, I don't know, like Doom for me is like culturally significant, but like at the same time, it's not something that had a huge impact on me personally, because like I don't know, FPS for me was a little bit more, I don't really know the word. Like I'd say retro, but that's not the truth. Like for me, it was more like I played FPS because that was a nice sort of genre that like I knew that I could be good at for a while back when I was younger, and it's like that worked out well for me for that point. But Doom for me ends up being a little bit more personal, I guess. But we'll pan on that later.
Okay. For me, it was around maybe 1994 that I played, probably beginning of 1994 when I played Doom. My dad had the shareware version of the game. He eventually went to, you know, one of those PC and Amiga swap meets that they had all over the place, you know, pretty much piracy. And he got the whole version of the game. Upon playing it, I played Wolfenstein 3, and I loved the hell out of that game. I played all 6 chapters. I beat the hell out of it. I killed Hitler numerous times. It was kind of funny, too. You know, I'm shooting Hitler, and I'm sitting at my home in Germany at the time. Seemed kind of weird, but funny at the same time. I don't know why. Don't question the mind of an autistic 10-year-old. It's just what it is. Doom, to me, when it came out, was quite possibly one of the most unique and amazing experiences I ever had. Being able to go from just a single simple corridor shooter with no layering whatsoever to a fully realized, almost 3D experience where you can actually go up and down stairs, elevators. You had acid that you had to worry about. You had ceilings that can suddenly come and crush you down. You had monsters that could run at you or throw fireballs at you or shoot rockets at you, fly around you and, you know, ram you from behind if you're not paying attention. Secrets that you can uncover just by, you know, doing all kinds of random stuff, by like accidentally shooting the wall and it just opens up to reveal a hidden path. Finding that random switch in the middle of nowhere to realize that it just unlocked a door that you couldn't get through on the other side of the map. Experiencing the first time you encountered the cyber demon. Just a very unique and unforgettable experience for me is what it was. And then it just gave way to so many new things for me in terms of gaming as a whole. I mean, yeah, sure, at the time I was playing a bunch of fighters. I was playing Mortal Kombat, I was playing Street Fighter, I was playing my plethora of Sierra adventure games, and then Doom came into my life, and then after Doom gave way to Heretic, and then it gave way to freaking Dark Forces, and it gave way to Quake, and etc., etc., etc. So to say that maybe the first-person genre is one of my favorites is probably pretty accurate at this point in my life, despite the fact that I love, you know, numerous genres. And Doom is fundamentally one of those reasons, and one of those cornerstones of why I'm such a big gamer in this day and age. And before I get too carried away, we shall move on to Doom's significant impact on the game industry and its impact in terms of mass media. So, Mark, would you so kindly?
Well, Doom has been a thing for years, but it was probably at its cultural apex in terms of what influence it had and what people thought of it for years after its initial launch. Like, I personally didn't get to play the full proper version of Doom until about 97 or 98, but for a lot of people who had played Doom, Doom was a thing that they carried with them for years. And our culture, gaming culture, I don't want to necessarily say loved and revered Doom, but it carried around Doom for a while. Doom was kind of sort of emblematic of what the 90s was. It was extreme. It was, ultra violence. It was hard rock and just shit blowing up everywhere and fuck you, the man, and whatever stuff that 90s extreme concepts sort of came to idolize. And Doom wasn't necessarily trying to be that thing. You weren't going to look at Doom and think, yeah, well, this is trying too hard, because it did what it did before that was even a concept that, media creators were trying to chase down. Doom was just Doom. It was just what it was, and everybody else was rapidly trying to ape off of that sort of concept. So it stands to reason that Doom's popularity just exploded outward from PC. So you had Doom the comic book, Doom the Doom the concept project CD, and in some cases Doom the novelization.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ, that fucking thing. Yeah, I just want to take an aside here and note that I owned the Doom series of books. Like, I have a few. Them. Yeah, I still have them somewhere. I have like a few novelizations of books, and the Doom series is far and away the worst that I have ever owned. Which I say because I haven't actually read the Hell of Cyberpunk thriller book that Matt Yeager sent me. So that could be worse. I don't know. But this was very much written by science fiction writers who were tapped to write a Doom story, but did not actually like Doom in any meaningful way. Which is the thing you'll see a lot. Doom is a very simple concept to write about. Somebody did a science, opened a hole to hell, demons came out. But demons came out. Anytime anybody who is not on board with Doom decides to try and rewrite something with this, it's always, no, but they're aliens. Every time. Mm-hmm. And the Doom books are no greater are the greatest example of getting that shit wrong and not understanding what the appeal of Doom was. The first book in the Doom series features, two Doom Marines, Sergeant Flynn Taggart and Arlene, I don't remember her last name, I don't care to look it up right now, fighting through the dead. They find like this hacker dude who helps them shut down the portal to the aliens, because the aliens have physically modified themselves to become like demons, to look like what humans would consider to be demons, I guess, as a psychological scare tactic. So eventually Arlene and Flynn shut down the alien invasion from that side of things, but then discover, the aliens have invaded Earth, which becomes Doom 2.
Oh god. And to cut in real quick, the first book wasn't that bad. It had some interesting ideas going through as they were doing like pretty much the first 3 chapters of Doom 1. It's when they get to Hell on Earth that everything goes south by southwest real fast, and not in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, so they come up, the first couple of chapters are the characters attempting to figure out how to get back to Earth, which in the games they literally just resolved with you entered a teleporter and now you're on Earth. Here they had to, like, they found like this mail pod or something that fires them to Earth, and they barely managed to, survive. So then they find themselves at a compound in a Mormon compound in Utah, I want to say.
Yeah. The Utah is currently the only place in the entire world that is currently not touched by demons. And their excuse is that Mormons have been preparing for the apocalypse forever. Because they had people in all branches of the government and everything bringing in resources.
Oh, good.
I mean, to be fair, if you're going to believe that any religion is going to be prepared for the end times, it's going to be either the Mormons or the whatever. I don't remember the name of the Christians that are specifically into like the Left Behind series of books, but of the two, the Mormons are the ones who are more likely to be like, well, shit, we got to kill everything now. Where's the guns? So,
Mormons and their stockpiles. Who knew?
So basically, they try to get in touch with the Marines, and it's like, oh, it turns out the Marines have been taken over. Everything's been taken over, so they have to kill all of the demons, which is fine. They get paired up with this guy who Arlene falls in love with, and they like get married, and it's like this whole thing. And they also get paired up with this like 14-year-old hacker girl who ends up being an incredibly important character in the later parts of the franchise, which is not a thing I thought I would ever say about Doom, but here we are, and there it is. They eventually find their way to, like, they're supposed to go to a specific location to do a thing to like help disrupt the aliens' attack, and the guy that Arlene falls in love with like gets blinded with like alien attack shit or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the hacker girl does some stuff. So Arlene and Flynn like basically end up like trapped in this tower at the end of the book, fighting all, like, they've successfully done what needed to be done to help save, humanity. And they come up with like they're like they imply that they're coming up with a stupid escape tactic, but it's not shown. The third book, they just start in Hawaii. Because apparently from the second book, they learned nobody wants to spend 4 fucking chapters reading how we did the escape. Just do the escape off panel. Mm-hmm. Okay. The third book is like, oh, well, the aliens are doing a thing in space, and we have to go stop them. Like, this has nothing to do with anything about Doom. It's mostly a lot of talking, actually. Which is very weird that you can say that a Doom book is mostly a lot of talking. But this is like its own storyline. They don't have a Doom story to base anything off of, so it's just, oh, well, we have to go get on a spaceship and do a thing. So they get on the spaceship, and it's like, well, Arlene and Flynn are going to go to the aliens' homeworld and kill them, and then come back. And when they come back to Earth, maybe, like, 'cause, like, they work off of the idea of faster than light travel sort of exists. So the amount of time that is spent on the spaceship is a couple of like weeks, but it's like years pass for the people outside of it, which is a very interesting and decidedly science nerdy way of explaining how faster than light travel works. Like, this is the sort of explanation that somebody would come up with for their science fiction FTL travel if they are very boring.
It's practically like they just took a few pages out of the Ender's Game series for Lightspeed Travel.
Right. It's so whatever. They get to this thing, and it's like, oh, well, if we get on this boat, this spaceship, we can kill this fleet, and it will help humanity, and maybe we'll get back in time that Arlene can like spend a couple of years with her husband when he's like 90 and dying. They end up getting trapped on a second spaceship, which is being rocketed back to the alien homeworld. So, like, they're going to be 200 or 300 years out of touch with humanity. And they don't like that. And, Arlene's husband is going to be dead for centuries by the time she gets back to Earth. And that's the end of the book.
Mm.
Oh, you missed the most important part. When they encounter a couple of aliens who are enemies of
the bad guys. And they're like, they're what the fuck did they name them?
I think they gave them like stupid names like Ted and Bob or something like that.
Yeah. Like they were like this two-headed alien. It was very strange. And they were like kind of agreeable, and it was just a very weird concept. So the fourth book is my favorite because we are so far removed from Doom at this point that having that name attached to the book is fucking insulting to anything having to do with id Software's game. Like the entirety of the fourth book is basically about how the Doom aliens have been eradicated by some other alien force. We don't know what it is. And then they meet what humanity has become, I guess. But, like, this other group of aliens has become, like, parasitic life forms that sort of achieve, like, a symbiotic parasitic relationship with them. So then the Flynn and Arlene characters are split off into two different versions. One version is a technological construct version that is existing in a digital remake of the original Doom universe that they dealt with, that they sort of eventually just end up like dying within. Like it's not told that they die, but like the actual Flynn and Arlene kill the aliens, so they're basically just going to die in this like digital simulacrum of a universe.
Yeah, if I recall, the ending was that the one their bodies got trapped in kind of a comatose state because they were injured or something like that, and then
well, no, it's two different versions. Their bodies get pulled out of this.
Yeah, their bodies get pulled out of it, but their minds are like stuck in this alternate virtual reality system where they're reliving their memories from the first book.
A part of their minds are stuck there. Like a version of them are stuck there. Mm-hmm. So they know that they're stuck in this VR world, and they get to the end of it, and they just sort of like they kind of realize, that they are God in this universe, and they just start like doing whatever. I don't know what the point.
They start to get some of the monsters to become allies of theirs. They even give them nicknames and stuff like that. It's kind of hilarious.
It's very weird. The other half is their actual meat space bodies end up getting onto a spaceship and flying back to Earth with some of their alien buddies, and they get back to Earth. And Earth has long since been abandoned. Whatever remained of humanity is gone. And they find this fucking tower in Utah that the hacker girl like built some kind of a message for them in, and was basically like, congratulations, you did it, but we left. And they go and they fly somewhere else. And that's just the book. That's Doom. That's Doom. 50% of it is spent in a VR landscape where these characters are reliving the first game, and the other 50% is coming back to Earth, which has now just been taken over by all of the plants and animals because humanity abandoned the planet for some reason. Doom the novelization, everybody.
Oh, well,
it is the worst. It is the fucking worst.
It's definitely worse than the movie.
Even if it had been its own thing, it would have been boring and badly written. Like, I don't want to put too fine a point on this, so to be blunt, Dafiad Abhu and Brad Lineweaver, if you guys ever see this, you guys are bad at writing science fiction. You should be ashamed of how bad you are at writing science fiction, and I don't even know how the fuck you got the job writing this shit in the first place. It is embarrassing as a fan of Doom. The fact that you were like, no, this shouldn't be demons from hell, it should be aliens. Like, the fact that you came up with the shit you came up with, but you were embarrassed to have this be associated with demons, fuck you. These being demons would have been the least embarrassing part of this.
Oh, absolutely.
So aside from the Doom novels, Mark, what other cultural significance do you think the Doom franchise had?
Oh well, Doom basically gave us the never-ending kingdom of the first-person shooter. Like, I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but Doom essentially is responsible for the first 10 years of first-person shooter supremacy in the video game genres. And kind of sort of is indirectly responsible for the death of the adventure game. Along with
I would agree with that. I would agree with that.
I mean, I did say that I was playing adventure games, but once Doom came out, I wanted to play more first-person shooters.
Well, it's like this. Adventure games were where you went because on the PC, they had the gameplay available to do stuff with. There weren't a lot of gameplay options in the 80s. There weren't a lot of options for what you could do in the 80s, mechanically speaking. So you were kind of sort of left with working with stuff like, text parsers and basic point and click. Adventure games were generally considered to be the place where you went alongside, the various RPGs that existed if you wanted writing in your video games. Platformers still existed, though they were much more of a console thing. But if you wanted like actual, dialogue and story and whatnot, you went to adventure games, you went to RPGs. Doom comes along and it's like, okay, we're just gonna kill demons in hell and on the moon. Wolfenstein was fine.
To quote John Carmack, a story in a video game is about as significant as a story in a porno.
Yeah, John Carmack has said lots of shit over the years.
Just because the game is good doesn't mean he's a smart man.
But continue, Mark.
So, in any case, they come up with the idea of, story is superfluous. Let's just fucking get in there and kill demons. And the thing was, at that point in time, that isn't the most controversial opinion to have because, storylines in gaming were just kind of there. They just existed. So, from that perspective, at least, I can nod and go, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Like, now, it's fucking dumb to say that, but at the time, I can kind of sort of see where he was coming from. You know what I mean? Okay. So, Doom comes along and does the first-person genre in a way that is just utterly game-changing. Prior to that point, Wolfenstein 3D existed, but Wolfenstein 3D is sort of like a cultural footnote as far as first-person shooters go. People liked Wolfenstein 3D, thought it was fine, but there are actually a couple of sequels to Wolfenstein called, the Spear of Destiny series, and chances are good this is the first you're ever hearing about that.
I was today years old.
Yeah, so it's the fact that Wolfenstein 3D is a thing we remember, but nobody gives a fuck about its sequels or in any way thinks about them or cares about them, should tell you where FPS games were going post Wolfenstein 3D. It was an interesting curiosity and people certainly liked them, but that was about as far as it was going to go. Keith Courage, the fact that this may be the first some of you are hearing about that should tell you volumes about where that was going. Doom made first-person shooters into the genre everybody wanted to make. Rise of the Triad exists because of Doom, which some of you are like, what? But yeah, that was a thing that was, hot shit at the time. Quake exists because of Doom.
Duke Nukem
Unreal exists because of Doom.
Unreal and an Unreal Engine in general. Unreal Engine exists because of Doom.
Halo exists because of Doom. But more importantly, Doom inspired Marathon, which gave way to Halo.
Yes. Halo exists because of Doom. The Call of Duty franchise as a whole exists because of Doom. And all of that was made popular because first-person shooters exploded in popularity. Like it's not a secret that Doom has been on the majority of consoles that have been on the majority of platforms that have been released because it's that much of a cultural significance piece. It changed that much in the world of gaming. First-person shooters were just kind of a genre that was going to exist. Doom comes along, and they took over PC development. They took over the PC real estate for years. You know, stuff that probably would have been in a completely different genre ends up becoming a first-person shooter. Adventure games become less and less of a priority because it becomes easier and easier to make games where you just move around and shoot at shit than games where you rub things onto other things and hope that stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the first-person shooter becomes the genre, especially in America, in the West.
And
this is because of Doom.
And because of Doom, we gave way to the flood. I mean, even though you mentioned some first-person shooters that came out, it gave way to the term the Doom clone.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a wave of games that were inspired by Doom for about a span of 5 years, both on console and on PC. I mean, who could forget Chex Quest on the PC? But it wouldn't be until about, people started separating themselves from Doom when they started developing their own engines for their own first-person shooters. Like you had the Jedi engine for Dark Forces. You had the build engine for what was it, the Duke Nukem game? I forget.
I think so.
And then you had another engine that was being developed by the guys who did Power Slave and the port of Duke Nukem for the Saturn. And of course you had the Quake engine, which was, developed again by id Software for Quake. So, I mean, you had a lot of, pretty much it was like in the mid-90s is when people were like, you know what, we don't want to be known as the Doom clone, and that's when the one-upmanship started coming.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Any more, Mark?
The only other thing I can really talk about here outside of that is that I don't want to say, because there's eventually a point where the student becomes the master. I don't want to say that Doom has had a lot of influence outside of that period of time, because first-person shooters have kind of evolved beyond Doom ever since Halo became a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Halo changed the direction that first-person shooters were going in. Call of Duty changed the direction that first-person shooters were going in. But I will note that I do think that Doom 3 more or less indirectly created the genre of first-person horror game on Steam, as Jim Sterling wants to call it, where you get a first-person horror game on Steam. And like that seems kind of silly, but okay, Penumbra, Amnesia, Outlast, Soma,
Fear,
Layers of Fear, Home Sweet Home, to a lesser extent Alien Isolation, because that was always going to be its own thing. But it's I feel like these games owe a debt to Doom 3 for kind of giving their ideas, their concepts, a sort of template to exist within. Because while Doom 3 wasn't exactly a particularly well-received first-person shooter, though I do like the more modern interpretations where they just let the fucking flashlight be out all the time when you have a gun. Like the packages they released on the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. Those, while nobody really particularly likes Doom 3, it did directly influence a lot of that kind of stuff towards being a big change in genre for where horror games were. I mean, Resident Evil 7 probably doesn't exist if it's not for Doom 3.
That's most likely. Now, I mean, this is hypothetical, and I did mention that we probably weren't going to go in this direction, But is it too early to tell what the significant impact of Doom 2016 has done, or do we need to wait another year or two until once the new game comes out?
I don't think there's been a significant historical impact from it as of yet. It's making first-person shooter games more arcadey again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that anybody's necessarily trying to rip that off.
I mean, we do have games like Overwatch and
the
Battle Royale games, which are very arcadey-esque. I'm not saying that. No. Hear me out first.
Miss me. I hear where you're coming from, but miss me with that shit. Overwatch is entirely ripping off Team Fortress 2.
Well, yes, but I'm just saying, like, the ideas of making games like multiplayer games, like, back in the days of like Quake 3 Arena and Unreal Championship game.
Doom for its multiplayer, though. Everybody likes Doom for its really great mechanical game feel. They love it for the way its game feel works, but its multiplayer is kind of there.
Doom 2016. Yeah, Doom 2016 multiplayer is there, but if you were to go back. But if you're talking about the original Doom 1 and Doom 2's multiplayer, I mean, shit, that was like an eye-opening experience for a lot of people in terms of, playing with somebody who's like, maybe across the street.
Oh, yeah. No, Doom's original multiplayer, the original Doom's multiplayer was transcendent. Like, I, as a gamer, did not get into online multiplayer until I ended up getting a PC because outside of the weird attempts that third-party companies made to try and get people online. Online multiplayer in the console market did not really become a thing until, at the earliest, I'll say Phantasy Star Online on the Dreamcast with its, attached modem. Yeah, but for a lot of people, you probably didn't see it until maybe the Xbox or the Xbox 360.
Yeah,
I mean, even though the PS2
was late.
Yeah, even the PS2 had an online adapter, but unless you were playing Final Fantasy XI or Resident Evil Outbreak or SOCOM, or the original Monster Hunter, yeah.
Right.
You weren't playing online. And, Monster Hunter Online was fine, Resident Evil Outbreak was fine, Final Fantasy XI was fine. Most people did not play those games.
No. And if they did, they were not playing games like that on a console. They were on PC.
Right.
Why play Evercrack on your PS2 when you can just play the 120 gig version on your PC?
Because the version on PS2 wasn't an MMO; it was a ARPG like Diablo.
Yeah, I know. It was EverQuest Adventures.
Well, they had an EverQuest Online Adventures game.
Right. Yeah, that was the ARPG.
That was also an ARPG?
Yeah, they were both ARPGs.
I thought it was an actual a watered down port of EverQuest, but hey.
I think you're thinking of Champions of Norath, Jan.
Maybe I am thinking of Champions of Norath. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, because those games were straight up
ARPGs.
Dark Alliance.
Yeah.
They were great versions of Dark Alliance, and I wish that we had received more of them. Because holy fucking shit, they were a lot of fun. But yeah, no, there was like a quasi MMO version that came out, which was weird.
But
it
reminds me a lot of like DC Online.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I can see that.
But back to like Doom Online.
Yeah, so Doom was very much an online experience none of us had ever had before. And I mean, there are games which have become a big deal online after the fact because of what they brought to the table. StarCraft is a prime example of a game long outlasting its initial expected impact because of how transcendent its online was.
Oh, absolutely.
But make no mistake, Doom is still a thing, even now. People still get together and, just run Doom parties. It's a great game for just absolutely ransacking the shit out of it with your friends if you want to do co-op. But more importantly, deathmatch is a concept that came from Doom. You would just get, however many people together into a place and just say, fucking kill each other. And that was it. That was it. You just fucking ran around blowing each other away, and it was at the time it was fucking great. Even today, there's still a great deal of amusement of okay, there's fucking 32 of you in a room, kill each other, do it.
Now, aside from all these amazing things that Doom has had influence on throughout the years, in regards to pop culture, though, Doom had both good and bad things going for it at the time. Jan, would you like to elaborate on that?
Oh boy, would I? So when it really comes down to just like pop culture and in general, there's a lot of side stuff that maybe some people know a lot about, and maybe some people are just kind of like, that was a thing. In an era where kids were like, oh, this is great, and it's like you said, that you put a bunch of kids in a room and you give them you give them a really cheap computer that can play Doom and say, here, it's all networked, go shoot each other. That was great and everything, but there was this weird idea that sometimes things like this could also be construed as a negative impact on these kids, and the reason why they want to do this is because they're communing with the devils in the game, and you name some sort of a genre, and I think we've touched on this before, Mark, where throughout history, there's always been a scapegoat in a negative context about stuff like this that's happened in the past. Shakespeare,
rock and roll music, comic books, D&D.
There's always been some form of pop culture that has always had parents and conservatives and fundamentalists always up in arms about it, and Doom was no exception. The demonic imagery, the blood, the gore, the visceral nature of just Doom in general really spoke to what a lot of people just didn't want to think about. And it's kind of indicative of the idea that just because you do something doesn't necessarily mean that you're a bad person, but because of the fact that that's the thing that they can key in on, that gives enough people quote unquote fear, that there's this idea that having it be the scapegoat is the right idea. One such specific thing that I recall that I actually could say that had enough, personal impact on my life was the boys that did the thing back in that one place known as Columbine.
Yeah.
And the idea that they were playing Doom and listening to Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails, and that everything they were doing was bad, and it was all part of course, and the reason why they were exiled and looked down upon is like, I can say with the utmost certainty that I know with an absolute 100% accuracy that the group of kids that were associated with the Trenchcoat Mafia were not like them at all. They were just as everything else in this world that happens to have some form of grouping or contextualized ideology. Klebold and Harris were not what the rest of that group was about. They were, as we've seen in just about any kind of cultural media, the extremists within a group that caused a very alarming and very large and very terrible rift, not just amongst friends, but in popular culture in general, where you've got a weird, and I'm not even kidding by using that word weird, a very weird subgroup of people who not only believe that what they did was right, but basically fetishize everything that they did as the best possible outcome for everyone. Which, that's a thing, and I don't get it, and I probably never will. But the idea that things like that can still be pushed on not just Doom in general, but just games that are of that persuasion tend to see a lot more time in both a positive and a negative light because of the content. And I think that pop culture in general and just life in general has changed dramatically because of these kinds of games, things like Doom, Grand Theft Auto, Resident Evil, Gosh, I can't even think of any of the others off the top of my head. There's some other ones that are more recent too, but it's like you get these weird games that come in at a time where naturally people are in strife. They're worried about some big crazy that's going to cause some sort of end of the world that they're afraid is going to ruin everything for them. And it turns out that that really wasn't the case. They were just freaking out over freaking out. And that tends to be a big selling point for a lot of the problems that come when you deal with these kinds of issues. And something like what happened with these boys and what happened, I mean, first of all, you can't downplay the tragedy. You can't. It happened. There's nothing we could do to go back. And honestly, I don't know that it means more than what it needs to mean beyond what people already had made of it. I know that I personally lost a lot of friends, not just because of what they did, but also because of what they did, if that makes any sense. A lot of it is also just on a basis of, like, this is not the first time that Doom has been hit. It's not the first time that video games have been hit, nor will it ever be the last time that video games are hit. But when you really boil down to it, a lot of this is basically just, if you put something out that's going to be culturally significant and does the things that it does, not just for the genre, but in general, and can become something that's so transcendent of its original medium into multiple facets of everyday life, it becomes something that's more than just the simplicity of what it was when it was originally created. If you really think about where Doom started and how it was originally produced and how it was originally, given away, shareware was basically one person buys it and then literally shares it with hundreds of thousands of other people for free or for whatever they want to charge for it, because they've already got their initial investment. And so it really doesn't matter, because eventually you're going to end up buying into one person buying into the game, and then 10 more people are going to buy into that because they don't want to have to worry about getting a secondhand copy, and then the whole cycle repeats itself. To this whole idea of, this is still a culturally significant game, and it's 25 years after it initially released, and people are still like, it's Doom. How do you not know what Doom is? If it's kind of like the same thing as saying, is like, if you don't know what Doom is, then how do you breathe air? Because everyone knows what Doom is. And it gets to a point where there's so much stuff that's like that now that I think that, as an aside, I've always stated that if you don't have haters, you're not doing it right. This is the same kind of dichotomy where people understand that Doom was quintessential for a lot of different games that exist now and wouldn't exist had Doom not existed in the first place. But at the same time, because it exists, it created its own problems, quote unquote problems, that put itself into a position that it will probably never be forgotten. Even, another 25, 50 years down the road, it's still going to be remembered as a game that, caused a revolution for many people, because without it, there would not be Call of Duty, there would not be Battlefield, there would not be Unreal, there would not be, the Unreal Engine, which I must say, a large majority of the games nowadays use Unreal Engine 4, which wouldn't exist had it not been for the fact that Epic Games wanted to find a way to be as good or better than its software in its time. So, it really boils down to, if you're able to understand that it exists because of the fact that it became the juggernaut, not that it started as one, it makes more sense for people to be like, oh, well, I can understand that. But at the same time, it's like, but, and it's like, you shouldn't have to worry about the but at the end of something that is as significant as Doom in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Now, to go back a little bit, even before the unfortunate Columbine incident, I don't know if you pressed on because I had to walk away, mentioned it while I walked away, but Doom was one of the mini games that was listed as a cause for the creation of the ESRB. And whether that's good or bad, I mean, that's really your decision to make. Everyone has an opinion. So, but we have the ESRB now. But there was a lot of a lot of negativity going on in regards to Doom in the pop culture, but there was a lot of cultural significance because everybody, like you said, everybody knew what Doom was. To this day, everyone knew what Doom was. There's multiple movies, TV shows. Hell, I think they even referenced it on The Simpsons multiple times about Doom. I mean, if you're literally showing up on an episode of The Simpsons, you've practically made it. Well, at least back in the 90s. I mean, nowadays, nobody cares.
Well, Simpsons has done it. Simpsons has done everything.
Simpsons has done everything, yeah.
At this point, if you've been on The Simpsons, you've made it. And beyond that, if you've been on South Park, you've made it as well, because that's also a thing. It's either on or been made fun of by South Park.
Yeah.
But Doom has had that cultural significance to it. Beyond that, though, Doom has, of course, laid the groundwork for community support and longevity to franchises. A lot of games out there don't even have nearly a quarter of the lifespan that Doom 1 and 2 have had. And that is in part due to mods. Doom, as far as I can recall, is one of the first games that allowed people to make their own maps or in the form of WADs. WAD files, and I was making some in the mid-90s thanks in part to this thing right here, the Doom Companion, a big-ass book that came with a CD. On top of that, the CD had about 100 or so extra custom-made maps, including, shooting Santa Claus or an alien-themed WAD. It also had the extremely popular at the time Serenity Trilogy, for the mods. I had there's a bunch of programs on here that you can work with as well. Like there was a DOS version of the Doom editor. There was Doom Ed, which allowed you to do all kinds of vector making and stuff like that with your maps. It was very significant in terms of the beginning of the modded community. There was even a sprite editor in there, which allowed you to create your own custom graphics, which I think was really unheard of in the mid-90s. I mean, sure, it wasn't until then Quake came out, and then you could do it in the third dimension. And people were going apeshit over this, especially when Unreal came out, and they had even more tools thanks to the Unreal Engine.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, again, this is another significant impact that Doom had by introducing the ability to mod
one of the very first modding communities. Absolutely.
Pretty much. And to this day, the Doom community is one of the strongest and biggest communities that are still going strong to this day. And some of the most significant and most recent mods that have come out have actually managed to create their own front ends, their own engines, their own programs that allow the Doom source code to be modified in ways that I'm sure Carmack wish he had back in the 90s. I mean, we've had the Doomsday engine.
In some cases not.
Yeah. We have like the Doomsday engine, which is an older engine that came out, but allowed for, graphical and lighting improvements in the game, and even people could import 3D models for 2D sprites. You've had Z-Doom, which was one of the first multiplayer, modern multiplayer programs to allow people to still play online well after the Doom, modem thing upgrading to, Ethernet and broadband. Then you had stuff like GZ Doom, which is updated like front ends, Doom Seeker, Xandarum, all these programs that allowed people to connect in new ways, to share ROMs and all that stuff. And of course, now some of the most popular mods out there include, of course, the most recent one being Brutal Doom, which has two things going for it. It is a completely revamped version of the original game to be extremely more violent, more fast-paced, more frantic, and to be truthfully honest, a hell of a lot more fun, and probably closer to what what I think the Carmack and Romero wanted Doom to be back in the early 90s. And then, of course, you had Project Brutality, which is like a whole new game unto itself with brand new sprites, remade music, new mechanics and weapons. It's just like a whole conversion. It's like as if this was probably like a true sequel to Doom before Doom 64 and Doom 3 came out. And it's just like there's so much that is going for the Doom community right now. I mean, I can't really say much in terms of, let's say, like other communities, like, we'll say, Quake and the Unreal. I mean, I think Unreal community is still very significant. I don't know. I mean, the Unreal Engine is usually released for free, right? I mean, I know...
It is free, yeah.
Yeah, I do know, charge for their Quake, for their engines, like somewhere around the vein of $2,000 or something like that for the ID Tech.
The Quake engine, the original Quake engine used to sell for a lot of money, but then they kind of got to a point where they understood that the Unreal Engine was basically going to be overall a better engine, and they just stopped. At that point, they stopped producing. And I think part of the modding community for both Quake and Doom basically created all of the multitude of free versions of the editors for both of the games at that point, because they were given the front, like those guys already had the front ends, so they made new versions of it and released it to the general public. But at that point, it had already basically lost in terms of which engine is going to end up being better, either Quake or Unreal. And as we see now today, obviously Unreal, is the engine of choice for a lot of games nowadays. That know.
Oh, what, you don't mean people want to use Frostbite anymore?
Look, let's be completely honest here. Frostbite is only for first-person shooters. Period. The only games that make anything or any sense and actually work in Frostbite are games like Battlefield. Period. Like,
yeah, no, I agree with that one 100%.
Yeah. The fact that they tried to even bother using Frostbite for Andromeda and not letting them use the internal BioWare tools to actually update and modify the existing assets is the primary reason why Mass Effect Andromeda failed. Period. Because the original cutscenes, the original videos, the original trailers, the original teasers that they had for that game were gorgeous in Frostbite. But the problem was they were also using internal BioWare assets and tools that EA did not give to the other studio when they said, just use Frostbite, and that's why we got the absolute gem that is the current version of Andromeda.
Now, a couple of other mods I'd like to point out. One is more recent. It's a total conversion of Castlevania done in the Doom modding community, which is amazing, to be truthfully honest. All new sprite work, music remixed from the original Castlevania games, and of course Mark's favorite, H-Doom.
Hey man, that guy's putting in a lot of work into making sure that you can fuck demons. I respect that kind of work ethic.
Hey, the man has passion. Let's put it that way.
He is completely redoing the sprites in Doom from the ground up so that they all got titties. And you know what? I respect that work ethic. I respect the ethos that man has to make sure that you can, fuck the demons in Doom.
Yeah. Let's be honest though, the absolute pinnacle of Doom modding was the version of Doom where somebody took literally, and I'm not even kidding, every possible sprite, wall, gun, sound, and turned it into the grunting noise
from Home Alone, from Home Improvement. Yeah, have you seen? That is.
Oh my god, it's god awful! It is the most if you thought that some movies were absolutely terrifying, this is probably one of the worst things you've ever seen, and you can't stop screaming. It's just that frighteningly bad. But yet somebody took the time to go out of their day to create this WAD and these sound files and put it all into Doom and be like, this is a thing that I spent time on. Please enjoy.
I gotta respect that work ethic.
Exactly.
Somebody had a goal and they worked their ass off to meet it.
Yeah, I can't hate on that. I cannot hate on that.
So, well, aside from all the modding community and the significance of the first two Dooms, Doom 2 being a very popular game upon its arrival as well in 1995, and of course then they had the official expansions TNT and Plutonian Experiment. Let's talk about the other games that have come out since then, and let's just gauge them a little bit. Like, we already talked a little bit about Doom 3. Let's talk a little bit about the black sheep of the family, although I still think it's underrated in many ways. I think I like this game a lot. It's Doom 64.
Doom 64 is fine. It's fine.
A game that was originally created for the Nintendo 64, brought to us by Midway. This game was obviously the predecessor to what Doom 3 eventually became, because this game focused more on the horror aspects and not being able to see a damn thing of where you're going, and pretty much complete enemy redesigns. Like from the ground up was focused on like the horror action concept all the way through to the very end. Jan? You were going to say something.
No?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I cut you off, but okay.
I didn't say anything. My mouth's been closed this whole time, dude.
No, okay. But anyway, what did you guys think of Doom 64?
Doom 64 is fine. It's fine. It's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine.
You think it's perfectly fine where it is? Not that it's better than it really is, or it's actually worse than you think it is? It's just
not
fine.
GoldenEye, so that's a thing.
It's not Turok, which it came out at the same time.
No.
It's not Disruptor.
Let's be honest, nothing is Turok, and we're glad for that.
Hey, the first two Turok games were fine. Everything after that was just the shits. I don't want to hear it. First-person shooters on the Nintendo 64, I'm just surprised were functional. Okay.
Perfect Dark.
Turok is tolerable. I don't hate it.
If you played it on the PC, it was a much better experience. I actually have the PC version of Turok 1 and 2.
You want to know why?
Please tell me.
You got a mouse.
Yeah, but actually, believe it or not, you don't have a cursor for aiming.
That's right. Then that's part of the reason why that game was bad.
Actually, it wasn't that bad. It was a lot of fun. But hey, mileage may vary. Anyway, so after Doom 64, yeah, we talked a little bit about Doom 3 and its inspirations in terms of a horror game and the horror first-person aspect to it, so it's just bounce around. And then that's, of course, when people started to get crazy with what can they port Doom onto after it got ported to every console and handheld, including the Tapwave Zodiac, making its way onto mobile phones.
Doom is still alive. Like, people are like, can you play Doom on your fridge? Can you play Doom on this? Can you play Doom on that? Like,
you can play Doom on the touch bar on a MacBook.
You can play Doom on the screen of an ATM.
Yeah.
You can play Doom on a smartwatch. You can play Doom on a tablet from the early 2000s.
Yo, if that Atari watch had focused on giving you a playable version of Doom on a smartwatch, I think it would have been a lot more successful.
Hey, somebody ported Doom to the original Atari 2600.
Well. I mean, that doesn't shock me. It's possible.
I mean, I you know what? Again, this guy had a goal, and I commend his merits. But like,
people have done the initial theme song of the first stage music of Doom in Omophone.
People have done the original version of the Doom theme on hard drives.
Yeah.
Oh, that
printers.
Yeah.
That hurt my ears so much.
It sounds better than most people trying to hum it. So
yes.
I mean, anything is. But, like, I think that in general, the idea of where they went with Doom and sort of how it kind of evolved once they got away from kind of where it started with, like, Doom and Doom 2. Obviously, Doom 3 happened. Doom 64 happened. Final Doom was a thing, but let's be honest, why was it a thing? Didn't really need to be.
I mean, that was just a couple of official expansion, not expansions, but like a couple of official WOD packs or whatever you want to call them, like fan-made mission packs.
I mean, basically, yeah. And then they got paid for it, so good for you.
You know what? Before we end the show, I do want to talk about Mr. Romero's announcement from yesterday. I don't know how many people have actually heard it, but it was all over Twitter, and he has a thing going on with limited run games. But we'll mention that before we end the show. But pretty much at this point, you know, what can Doom be ported on? What can play Doom is literally just a living meme at this point. It's just...
I mean, Doom is a board game, so anything, technically.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, now...
I keep wanting to pick that up. It looks like it's neat.
Yeah.
It actually seems like it wouldn't be terrible.
Now, of course, you know, there is the even though you talked about the novels, there is the movie, or movies, rather, of Doom. I did a video about Doom as an adaptation several months back this year with my buddy Holland, and it just misses the mark so hard. It tries, like, it took a guy who saw a little bit of Doom 3, and he tried to combine that with Alien and Resident Evil. And it became a giant mess. And there was literally an hour and 20-minute lead up into how Doom Guy becomes Doom Guy through the MacGuffin known as Chromosome 24.
Yes. I mean, let's be honest. No amount of Carl Urban and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is going to save your movie if it's that shit.
Okay, but, you know, the less said about that, the better. If you want to hear my true thoughts about that movie as a whole, please go to my YouTube channel and check it out. Fight Club Hubs is the channel name. However, coming out next year, and straight to DVD from Universal because they have that much confidence in it, is a brand new Doom movie that's going to be a hard R, full of gore, and I think they said there's a female lead, but I'm reading conflicting reports because I don't exactly know who the lead is because there's barely any press for this movie, barely any information about this movie, other than a few pictures of behind-the-scenes shots. And maybe I'll watch it because I have to review it at some point. It's a shame it's not going to be in theaters, but at least it's not starring Mila Jovovich and not being directed by Paul Anderson, I guess.
We don't talk about the Monster Hunter movie.
I am deeply tired of Paul W.S. Anderson as a human being.
He says he's a big video gamer, and yet he does so much wrong for video game movies. It's like, you know what? At this point, I'll take Uwe Ball over you.
No.
No. Absolutely not.
At least Uwe Ball, you know, when he screws up, he at least screws up in glorious ways. But, I mean, enough of that.
Depending on the franchise, I might be willing to give you that one.
Postal?
Postal, sure.
In the Name of the King?
I didn't see that, and I don't really care enough.
I heard it sucked.
That one I heard was like boring.
That's
Dungeon Siege.
Dungeon Siege.
I heard that one was boring, honestly.
Yeah, I mean,
which is not what you want an Uwe Ball movie to be.
Mm-hmm. I heard House of the Dead was a nice little acid trip.
House of the Dead was deeply fucking stupid.
But anyway, so yeah, we have a new Doom movie coming out next year. I don't have IOs for it. I don't know shit about it outside of little
I don't
information.
know any of these names, and it looks like they're all relatively new people, so that seems like a thing. Clayton Adams as Winslow, Chidi Ajufo as Akua, Luke Allen Gale, Nina Bergman, Gavin Brocker, James Wilbur Brown. Yeah, I don't know any of these people's names.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've never heard of any of these people. All we know thus far as currently unconfirmed details, but could be very close to what the plot is actually about. The Phobos base is divided into 4 main sections on 2 levels, and Arboretum is mentioned as a key location, which has been seen in photographs taken by other actors. Phobos is one of the most unstable known locations in the solar system. Teleportation will play a key role in the plot, as expected from other revealed details. An ancient civilization existed on Phobos similar to the ancient Martian civilization from Doom 3, which had a language related to Sumerian. As in Doom 3, it is suggested that the civilization had contact with Earth in the ancient past. The BFG 9000 will appear with an official expansion of Barian Fusion Gun, though the character immediately mentions that the R&D department referred to their crown jewel weapon as the really big fucking gun. So, yeah, it sounds fucking terrible. Why would we ever want to watch this?
Because we like to suffer.
That sounds closer to a Doom movie than like the original Doom movie was.
That sounds better than the zombie apocalypse version of Doom. Now, we're pretty much at the end of the show right here in regards to, this retrospective of Doom. So I'll just end it on the thing that was announced yesterday by John Carmack. He actually released a brand new IWAD pack, which is a full 9 missions expansion for the original Doom. Now, he did release an official map for the original Doom about 3 years ago, and that map was huge. That was hard, and I loved it. If the new IWAD that he is releasing, for free, by the way, coming out, I think, in springtime of next year, is of any indication, then we're going to have some huge-ass maps that are going to be hard as hell and kicking our ass. And let's just be truthfully honest. I think Mark made this joke the last time we talked about the John Carmack map. It's like, 20 years later, Romero's finally made us his bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took an incredibly long amount of time, but congratulations.
The thing that he has going is he has some kind of a thing going on with limited run games where you get this thing. It's called Seagull, by the way. Sigil, Seagull. You can buy a physical copy, collector's edition of Seagull, which comes with a metal soundtrack on a CD, a concept art book of and planning for this for this expansion, as well as a floppy disk with a USB port at the bottom of it that contains the game on it. And it looked amazing.
Certain aspects of the 90s are okay to continue forward. Things like Doom and like decent music. Not so much, 3.5-inch floppy disks, please.
But it's a 16 gig. The floppy disk USB drive is 16 gigs. Can you imagine having that big old floppy disk just sitting on the port of my tower right here, just waiting for someone to accidentally elbow it just because it sticks out like that?
Ugh, God.
But
thanks for the offer, but I'll have to pass.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, I did pre-order. I'm not gonna lie, because I'm a sucker, and I like Doom. And
you do you, boo boo.
I do you. I do me.
You don't do me. that is not this podcast, and we are not talking about that.
No, we're not going there. But yeah, so we are at the end of the show. 2018 is over for GVN Live. Season 4 will begin at the end of January with our annual GVN Live Awards. With such wonderful categories like the Asshole Achievement Award, the Konami Award, and so many others. We've actually had quite a good run this year, minus a couple of setbacks and pushbacks for episodes and stuff like that. But then again, that's life, because life gets in the way sometimes. This isn't a job for us. We do this because we fucking love it. And I hope to have new things going on for GVN Live going forward in 2019. I'm happy to hopefully have you two still on board with me in 2019. Hopefully, we have other more prominent guests on the show. I mean, this year we had Brian join us. We had Jeff Tarzia join us. We had probably a couple other guests that I can't remember right now, but it was a pretty interesting run this year. Interesting topics. Probably going to try and do some more new things. We do have an idea of what we would like to do next year, like during the off week of GVN Live. We'll announce that next year, though. We're going to have to stay in the planning stages of that for now. But in the meantime, let's push our wares. Let's pimp ourselves out. Mark, you got any plans right now? What you might be doing over the summer break?
Well, winter break, but
yeah, winter break.
Honestly, at this point, like I've done before, it's working on streaming. That's my major thing right now. I've been doing the board game streams every other week, and then video games every other week. So I'm going to focus on that for the time being to make sure that I can get back into that groove. We are going to be doing a board gaming stream this week. Next week will be a video game stream, and then the week after that, I think I'm just going to do video games for a little bit, just because I don't want to make people come out here when there's drunkies on the road during the Christmas and New Year's holiday, and pick up board games again into January.
All right, and Jan, you're a busy streamer. What you been up to?
Something like that. Pretty much just the same as usual. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, getting it done. I don't know. It's been kind of weird. Like these last couple of weeks, I haven't actually done a Monday stream simply just because there's been other stuff that's been going on. Work has been really stupid, and we're ramping into a lot of really crazy stuff at work right now. So it's not really something that we've had the ability to like. I get off work and I'm like, I'm going to bed, because it's been pretty bad. But yeah, just pretty much the same thing. Just doing what I need to do, playing the games. I'm pretty sure I'll probably start really working on Monster Hunter again here pretty soon again, just because of the announcement of Iceborne and the additional content. Yeah, we're pretty much that's what we're gonna start working on more again. We're gonna grind a couple more people who just picked it up for PC through their PC grind so they can get caught up. I'm still not sure what version I'm going to end up primarily playing on once Iceborne is like officially kind of announced and released. Because as of right now, we understand that the console versions will most likely be out, and that there could be another possibility of no parity when it comes to the console version and the PC version of Iceborne. So we'll see. Other than that, I don't know. It's just been sort of whatever I feel like. It's been kind of nice to not really like stick to a specific schedule. We've been doing like I have a bunch of waifu mods for Darkest Dungeon, so I've been doing that on Wednesdays for like a waifu Wednesday thing because I'm a weeb, so sue me. But I don't know. Beyond that, I don't know. It's just been pretty basic. Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, still kind of a thing, and going from there.
Okay, and for me, I still do my stream. I'm doing Monday night Noob Adventures in Monster Hunting. Lately, it's been me and my friend Reggie dual screening Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. I mean, he couldn't come over last night, so I soloed it with a couple of other people and a bunch of randos online. Got to play my first variant, which was the Dread Queen Rathian, which was, wow, she hits hard. 3 Vets and a Noob is going to resume at the end of the year, probably beginning of next year, depends on what happens. We will be hopping back into Phantasy Star Online 2 soon. Rico is coming back from college. Yay! So all kinds of hilarity will ensue as we yell at him constantly because he doesn't know what he's doing. In the meantime, since there will be no GVN Live for the next, like, at least 4 weeks, I will be doing the planning stages of the GVN Live Awards, as well as trying to get a couple more episodes ready for release for my game adaptation videos going into next year. And that's about it. Before I end the night, was there anything about 2018 that stuck out to you guys in regards to the show or anything else in general? Mark?
Not that I can think of. I thought 2018 was, fine as far as like video gaming years go. I mean, it's definitely terrible in other respects, but as far as games go, it's been fine to me personally.
Mm-hmm. And
I don't have any particular memories for the show. I think it's been a good year for the show, but I don't have any one thing in particular that stuck out. I think it was just generally a good all-around year.
How about you, Jen? I mean, This is your first full year that you have completed with GVN Live. How do you feel about it?
It's been really fun. It's been really good. I'm happy to still be here. I'm happy to have my input in with you guys, just because I try to do what I can to bring sort of my own sort of take on what it is that I like and what you guys like, so that we have a bit more diverse conversation when it really comes down to it. Because let's be honest, we definitely want to make sure that it's interesting, instead of just I agree with that, yes I agree with that, okay, moving on, because that's a 10-minute show and no one wants that.
No. And if we have 10-minute shows, then I'm going to have to come up with another debate show where me and Mark are going at it about Final Fantasy 6 and 7.
Can we talk about a different game?
It's an example. It's not happening numerous times, Mark. Come on now.
I'm just saying, don't you at least want a chance to win?
Considering the fact that you guys talk about it at least once a month, I don't think so.
No, I'd say once every other month.
Fair.
Listen,
Fair.
Robert is secretly a sub.
Wow.
And you're a bottom person.
That's the same thing as a sub.
No, that's what a sub is. I would be a dom in this case.
No,
Yeah.
you're not.
I am
Pretty
Mr.
sure
Gray.
I'm pretty sure Mark is about as top as they come, Bucko.
No,
I am
he is the
Mr.
man
Gray.
bending over in front of me. I don't give a shit. I ain't no sub.
Mr. Gray will see you now, bitch.
What the hell happened to our conversation? Holy crap!
It
It
disintegrated
went
into immaturity, just like we always have it.
Wow, the TOS mobile is coming for both of you, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
All right. Well, with that, the end of the show is here. The end of the season is here. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, all two of you, and I wish you all a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Ramadan, Happy Non-Denominational Day to you, Happy New Year. Thank you, and have a good night.
Deuces.